The southern edge of the Iberian Peninsula is dominated by a towering monolith of limestone. Here, the cold, turbulent waters of the Atlantic Ocean violently collide with the Mediterranean Sea. Today, the Rock of Gibraltar is a bustling, modern strategic choke point. But hidden along its eastern face, carved deep into the stone by ancient, unforgiving waves, lies a network of sea caves, and within those caves lies one of the most haunting secrets in the history of human evolution. For over a century, the textbook narrative has told a biased story. When our direct ancestors arrived in Europe around 40,000 years ago, they brought consciousness and art to a primitive continent. The original inhabitants, the Neanderthals, were dismissed as slow-witted, evolutionary dead ends who simply faded away in the face of superior human intellect. But what if that story is completely wrong? What if the timeline of human consciousness doesn't belong exclusively to us? In a discovery that has sent shockwaves through the scientific community and forced paleoanthropologists to rewrite human history, archaeologists have broken open a sealed chamber within Gibraltar's Gorham's Cave complex. What they found inside was not just a collection of ancient bones. It was a perfectly preserved time capsule, untouched by light, wind, or human hands for 40,000 years. This breakthrough did not happen overnight. It was the result of 9 years of grueling, methodical excavation. A team of researchers from the Gibraltar National Museum, led by Professor Clive Finlayson, had been meticulously clearing millennia of sediment from the deepest, darkest reaches of Vanguard Cave, one of the 4 main caverns in the complex. Deep inside the mountain, the team hit a physical anomaly. It was a massive, dense plug of compacted sand that entirely blocked a passageway. This was not a sudden cave-in or a random pile of geological debris. It was ancient sand that had blown into the cavern and petrified over millennia, forming an impenetrable, natural concrete seal. When the archaeological team finally managed to carefully breach this ancient barrier, they stepped into a 43-foot-long chamber carved directly into the roof of the cave. The air inside was completely still. Every speck of dust, every bone fragment, and every scratch on the wall had been frozen in time. The stratigraphy, the geological layering of the sand, indicated that this room had been sealed at the exact moment the last Neanderthals were supposedly disappearing from the face of the earth. What the team found inside was baffling. Scattered across the floor of this pitch-black chamber were the remains of apex predators, a lynx, a spotted hyena, and a massive griffin vulture. These animals do not naturally lair together. They do not crawl into the deepest, darkest, elevated recesses of a cave to die side by side. Furthermore, the limestone walls bore violent, deep scratch marks from a large, unidentified carnivore, indicating a beast had been trapped inside. But the most devastating piece of evidence in the room was also the smallest and the quietest. Sitting in the absolute darkest corner of the chamber, 65 feet deep into the cavern, was a single, unbroken whelk, a large, edible sea snail. In archaeology, context is everything. Sea snails do not climb vertical cliffs. They do not navigate into pitch-black caverns. That single shell was deliberately carried from the crashing waves of the Mediterranean into the darkest depths of the mountain by a living, breathing Neanderthal over 40 millennia ago. Yet, the sealed chamber was only the beginning. As researchers expanded their excavations into the deeper, older sediment layers of the cave complex, the traditional timeline of human intelligence began to completely collapse. In a layer dating back an astonishing 60,000 years, scientists uncovered a structure that simply shouldn't exist, according to the old textbooks. It was a specialized, engineered hearth. But this was not a simple campfire built to roast meat or keep the freezing ice age winds at bay. This was a circular pit-like structure with distinct channels and a thick structural lining, designed for a highly specific industrial purpose, the chemical manufacturing of synthetic glue. The Neanderthals of Gibraltar were conducting a complex chemical process known as pyrolysis. They gathered the leaves and stems of the gum rock rose, a local Mediterranean shrub, and placed them in this specialized hearth. By carefully controlling the temperature and meticulously restricting the flow of oxygen, heating the plant matter without allowing it to catch fire, they were able to extract a thick, sticky, highly effective adhesive resin. They then used this manufactured tar to securely bind sharpened stone points to wooden shafts, creating highly lethal composite spears. Consider the profound cognitive leap required for this. This is not the primitive act of banging 2 rocks together. This is material science. It requires an intimate understanding of thermodynamics and local botany. It is an industrial technique that must be communicated, refined, and passed down from one generation to the next. But if chemistry and marine biology were not enough to elevate the Neanderthal mind, the Gibraltar caves held one final paradigm-shattering secret. For decades, the ultimate dividing line between us and them was art. The creation of abstract symbols, the ability to represent an idea, a feeling, or a map in a physical medium, was believed to be the exclusive cognitive domain of Homo sapiens. It was considered the spark of true consciousness. In the bedrock of Gorham's Cave, researchers discovered an engraving that erased that dividing line forever. Carved deep into the cavern's stone floor is a geometric pattern resembling a hashtag. Dating of the undisturbed sediment above it confirms the carving is at least 39,000 years old, a time before modern humans reached this region. This intentional abstract design is symbolic thought materialized in stone, proving that Neanderthal mind possessed the same capacity for symbolic reasoning as the humans who replaced them. So, this brings us to the ultimate, haunting question. If the Neanderthals of Gibraltar were this brilliant, if they were material scientists, marine foragers, and abstract artists, why did they vanish? The tragedy of the Gibraltar caves is that they were not just a fortress. They were a front-row seat to a slow-motion environmental catastrophe. During the last ice age, the view from the mouth of these caves was vastly different. Because so much of the Earth's water was locked up in massive continental ice sheets, global sea levels were up to 394 feet lower than they are today. When a Neanderthal stood at the entrance of Vanguard Cave 50,000 years ago, they did not look out over open water. They looked out over a sprawling, lush coastal plain that extended nearly 3 miles into what is now the sea. It was a Mediterranean Serengeti, a vibrant ecosystem of rolling sand dunes, vast stone pine woodlands, and seasonal freshwater lakes. It was teeming with deer, ibex, wild cattle, and the predators that hunted them. It was a hunter's paradise, and the caves were the ultimate vantage point. But the Earth's climate is a restless, unforgiving force. As the great glaciers slowly began to melt, the oceans rose. Generation after generation, the Neanderthals of Gibraltar watched the sea creep closer. Their vast hunting grounds were swallowed by the rising tide. The stone pine woodlands drowned. The freshwater lakes turned to salt. The traditional timeline dictates that Neanderthals went extinct across Europe roughly 40,000 years ago. But the artifacts in the upper layers of the Gibraltar caves whisper a different, more heartbreaking timeline. The archaeological evidence suggests that a small, resilient, and isolated population of Neanderthals may have clung to existence on this rocky peninsula until roughly 24,000 years ago. This means that long after the rest of their species had faded into the earth, the last Neanderthals on the planet may have been sitting in the dark of Gorham's Cave, listening to the crashing waves of a sea that had stolen their world. They survived here for an extra 16,000 years, pushed to the absolute edge of the continent, holding the line against extinction while modern humans built the foundations of our world just a few hundred miles to the north. The chamber they sealed is now open again. The sand plug has been removed, and the light of the modern world has finally touched the floor of Vanguard Cave. As Professor Finlayson and his team continue to dig deeper, sifting through tens of thousands of years of continuous occupation, they expect to find even more evidence that will force us to reconsider our place in the world. The sealed chamber of Vanguard Cave is not just an archaeological discovery. It is a monument to a species that adapted, innovated, and fought to survive right up until the moment the lights went out. The question that remains is no longer why they disappeared, but why it took us 40,000 years to finally look at them and see our own reflection.